Hey guys, it's Allie, and today we are going to be doing my October wrap-up. I read so many books in October. I participated in like 3 readathons. I participated in Readathon by Zoe Halloween Edition, the Dewey's 24-hour readathon, and the Spookathon. So I have a lot of books to get into, so let's go ahead and jump right in. The first book I read this month was The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. This follows a bisexual male aristocrat named Monty who is going on his continent tour with his best friend who he happens to be in love with and his sister and a chaperone. It's just about all their adventures and the trouble they end up getting into. So it's a very good book. I listened to it via audiobook, which was narrated by Christian Coulson, who portrayed Tom Riddle in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and he was such a good narrator. He just really captured all of the characters, and it just really made it for a very pleasant read. And like, his voice is like honey, let's just be honest. And this book was just so amazing. I liked it so much more than I thought I was going to. You know, I figured it was just like really overhyped because everybody's been talking about it, but it definitely deserves the hype. I think it was really, really good. So I highly recommend it, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This is a Halloween classic. I honestly don't know where you've been if you haven't heard of this, but this follows a doctor named Victor Frankenstein who is studying at this university that is like really hard to get into, and he decides he wants to create life. So he does that, but he's not really prepared for the consequences, and so pretty much a lot of tragedy ensues from there and danger, and it's just really, really good. I really, really loved it. I originally was intrigued by this because we were covering Mary Shelley in my women writers class, and I was really intrigued by her writing and by her life and stuff, and so I decided to pick this up. And it was the first time I've ever read it, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was This Monstrous Thing by Mackenzie Lee. I picked this one up, one, because it's a Frankenstein retelling. I just finished Frankenstein and I was like, I have to read it. And then 2, because I just wanted to read another Mackenzie Lee novel. I had no idea this was her debut one. I had only heard of The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. I don't know where this has been in my life, but I have been searching for this because it was my first steampunk novel ever, and it was so, so good. It made me realize how much I love steampunk stuff. Like, I already loved it, but like, I really, really love it in literature now. I guess you could also count The Infernal Devices as steampunk, but like, the legit, for real steampunk is this, and I freaking loved it. It just really explored places that Frankenstein wasn't able to go, but like, it was still very true to the story. Mackenzie Lee ended up both incorporating Mary Shelley and the actual novel Frankenstein along with a different sort of storyline. It has fantasy elements, and it was just so freaking good, and I am so glad I decided to read it. It's one of my favorite books of this year that I've read, and I just really, really loved it, and I highly recommend it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. And the next 3 books I read were The Forbidden Game trilogy by L.J. Smith. Please excuse the cover. This was written in the 90s. But this, even though it was written in the 90s and you could really tell by the language that was used, I really, really loved it. I ended up rereading this because I read it back in high school, and I was like, this is a very creepy book, and I was like, huh, maybe I'll like this again. And you know, I loved it just as much the second time around as I did the first. I gave The Hunter, which is the first one, 5 out of 5 stars. The Chase, which is the second one, I gave that 5 out of 5 stars, and I gave the final one, The Kill, 4.5 out of 5 stars. I just really, really enjoyed my reread of this. It's a love story. It follows some idiot teenagers who play this game and end up getting sucked inside of it, and they have to face all of their worst fears. And it just was so, so good. It's so creepy, but I love it so much. Like, it's not too creepy. It's just enough for me to really, really like it because I'm not really into horror stuff. But I am just, I could just go on for days. Like, this was published, all 3 of these were published in 1994, I believe. So like, it's pretty dated, but I still really enjoyed it. So if you're looking for a spooky read, then I definitely recommend you pick this one up, even if it's not till next year. Like, It's the same author who did The Vampire Diaries, and I just loved it so much. So as a whole, I gave this series 4.5 out of 5 stars. The last 5 books that I read this month were the last 5 novellas in the Tales from Shadowhunter Academy series by Cassandra Clare and a few of her friends. I had already read the first 5, but like I really wanted to read the last 5 in order to be able to read Lord of Shadows, so I did that. I read all 5 in one day. I know, that's like crazy for me. It takes me forever to read novellas. It took me like 9 months to read the first 5, and then I just blew through the last 5 because they were just so good. They were so good. Oh my god. Okay. But the first one was Pale Kings and Princes, and I gave that 5 out of 5 stars. So good. I read Bitter of Tongue, and I also gave that 5 out of 5 stars. I read The Fiery Trial, I gave that 4.5 out of 5 stars. I read Born to Endless Night, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. And then I also read Angels Twice Descending, and I gave that 5 out of 5 stars. This series as a whole, I would give a 4.5 out of 5 stars. The events in this novel happen after the events of City of Heavenly Fire, but they happen prior to the events of Lady Midnight, and I can't even tell you anything about it just because it would be a huge spoiler for the end of City of Heavenly Fire, so I'm not going to tell you anything about it really, just that it's really good, and you don't necessarily have to read it before you read Lady Midnight, but I would definitely recommend it. But I do think it should be required reading before you start Lord of Shadows because there's a lot of crossover between this series and then Lord of Shadows. So I think it's just going to really help your reading experience if you have this kind of backstory to go along with you. I just think it's really going to help. And I just really loved this. So I am so glad I finally decided to read it. I forgot a book. What a surprise. I read Deadpool Volume 1, Secret Invasion. I wanted to like it, but I ended up not really loving it. It's not my thing, so I ended up giving it 3 or 3.5 out of 5 stars. I forget which, but was not my favorite one that I read, but I am still really glad I ended up reading it, so I will let you go back to the regular scheduled events. There you have it. Those were all the books that I read in the month of October. I really loved everything I read this month. I had a really good reading month, so I am really excited about all those books. But that is going to be it for this video today, so thank you all so much for watching this. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.